So some background on me and how BasiGo started. So I'm originally from the UK. I studied maths, development, and sustainable development, and moved to East Africa in 2010 to work on technology adoption at the intersection of livelihoods and climate. And I've worked in everything from encouraging smallholder farmers to use agricultural inputs, cook stove deployment, solar home systems, and now electric buses. And at the center of a lot of these technologies, we really see, improvements in climate outcomes, very, very commonly improvements in health outcomes from not having to inhale smoke, etc. And then long-term economic benefits, because the renewable technology often is long-term, much more affordable than the ICE comparable. Unfortunately, a lot of these green technologies have a much higher upfront cost, which really inhibits adoption. And my career has really been focusing on trying how to reduce these barriers. I met my co-founder Jit at a company called Phoenix based in Uganda that distributed about 1 million solar home systems to off-grid customers using a pay-as-you-go financing model. And when Jit and I reconnected, having both left the company during the COVID-19 here in Nairobi, we were commenting on how clean the air was because everyone was staying at home, and noticing kind of really how it was a lot of the public transport buses here that cause a lot of the air pollution from the internal combustion smoke. And we thought, could there be a way, for example, for us to create a business model like solar home systems that would enable bus operators to adopt electric buses versus diesel buses, and still be able to benefit from that long-term cost of ownership without having a higher upfront cost. And so that was kind of the genesis of the model of how BasiGo started, by really looking to address the barriers of electric vehicle adoption. We're actually using off-the-shelf technology from China typically. So proven electric buses that have been in operation in hundreds of countries throughout the world. We do make a few small modifications such as seating position, door position, ride height, to match the local conditions. And obviously we right-size the engine, the motor, to ensure that it can deal with the daily use requirements of the transport, whether that's driving 200 kilometers per day or driving up hills with a 12% gradient like we have in Kigali. We manage our pay-as-you-drive leases via an in-house asset management platform that we call Paid. And on that platform, our lessees can see how their e-bus is performing, where it is, what revenue they've created, what their expenses are. So effectively a mini P&L and cash flow statement, which helps them better manage their business. We use the device to see how all of our assets are performing, both in terms of managing costs, revenue, and battery life, etc. And then our investors can access the platform as well to understand the buses that they've financed, how well they're performing, and how the cash flows are servicing the loans. So I'd say in terms of how our technology has changed people's lives is that there's an awful amount of excitement about the transition to electric mobility here in Kenya, and I would say throughout Africa as well. The main thing is, I think it's providing the opportunity for bus operators who have previously had no choice but to use diesel to be able to integrate electric vehicles into their fleets, such that their customers can ride on larger, more comfortable, quieter, less fumey buses, while the bus operators can actually make a higher net income by charging the passengers the same fare due to the lower OPEX of our buses. And then anyone who's not riding the bus, as these buses drive past you, you're no longer getting choked by black exhaust. So I think it's hopefully a benefit for not just the bus owners and the commuters, but also the city of Nairobi as a whole. So my vision for e-mobility, and I think speaking more specifically around kind of commercial private vehicle fleets, is that we would like to empower a platform such that any entrepreneur can benefit from a lower total operating cost of an electric vehicle compared to an ICE without having to pay the upfront capex. Our belief is that by doing this and ensuring that the infrastructure is there to charge and service these buses, will really radically accelerate the adoption of these technologies and address the climate crisis. In terms of providing jobs for the youth, I think my thoughts here are that a transition to a green economy is going to mean that many new technologies and skills are going to be required to affect such change. I've got a few gray hairs, and I think what I've learned is that I was much better at kind of learning and applying these new skills when I was younger than I am today. But I really think kind of the youth are going to be so important to kind of figure out, how we transition from ICE models to green technology models, because everything from how we think about refueling our vehicles, given that putting gas in your tank takes 3 minutes, whereas charging your vehicle takes 30 minutes or more, it's really going to change the paradigm of how we think about using vehicles and charging and servicing them. So I think the youth are going to be a key part in kind of helping us realize that change. In terms of what governments can do to support the adoption of I think e-mobility in particular, to kind of support an enabling environment for green investment, is that as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of these technologies have clear kind of environmental impacts, health impacts, as well as long-term kind of profitability impacts for the end users plus the consumers. And if you actually put a value to all three of those, I think there can be a really strong case for government to support with more, I think, kind of encouraging policies, for example, potentially around tax, potentially around standards, to accelerate the adoption of these technologies that I believe can actually pay off in the long term in terms of increased tax revenues for governments. And so I think my recommendation to government would be to actually do the work and actually perform the analysis to really understand how potentially, for example, something like a subsidy to encourage the adoption of buses could actually have financial benefits in terms of reduced spending on healthcare and actually maybe improved corporate income tax from higher operating margins. So in terms of the main challenges, we think that every market is different, and we've experienced this from having operations now in Kenya and Rwanda. So everything from kind of government policies, perception around costs and reliability of electric vehicles, grid reliability, land cost, they're all different, and they all present their own unique challenges. But one common thread across all markets is that given the capital intensity of our business, where we have to procure these e-bus assets up front and then we lease them over an 8-year period, we can recover our capital fairly slowly, is that high cost of capital and currency instability, especially if we're borrowing in local currency where our revenues, borrowing in hard currency where our revenues are in local currency, can create a challenge with debt service, which we need to really scale the business and address these climate issues. What keeps me so excited about the transition to green mobility is that it's, first off, a really kind of impactful sector to be in. You can clearly see and measure the environmental impacts as well as the health impacts vis-a-vis CO2 and other kind of pollutants like NOx and PM 2.5. But when we kind of look at the kind of sector that we're in, which is really public transport right now, it's such a key part and a linchpin to the general growth of the economies in sub-Saharan African cities. I mean, everyone needs public transport to get to work. So it's really such a key part in kind of helping the economy develop generally. If I was to give some advice to some other green entrepreneurs, I think it's that, especially in this kind of market right now, where in particular the VC markets are somewhat down, is that raising capital is really hard. There are lots of companies trying to raise money. There's a lot of noise for investors to choose from. And so I think it's really important to try and build business models that can actually reach scale. It's one of the main criteria that investors, particularly VC investors, look for, and that they really kind of can create high growth and large commercial returns. So if you can't do that, then it's obviously much harder to attract that kind of investment. My message at the Africa Green Economy Summit is going to be that investing in the transition to e-mobility can not only improve climate, can improve air quality and health outcomes, and also improve the infrastructure of our public transport services and make them more resilient to fossil fuel shocks. There's also a clear demonstrated path that it can create commercially attractive IRRs for investors, both on the debt and equity side. And yeah, this event is kind of really important. I'm really, really thrilled to be visiting Cape Town again. It's such a wonderful city. And I'm really keen to kind of connect with entrepreneurs who are facing similar challenges, and also to kind of network with investors who are looking to invest in the change to e-mobility in our cities across sub-Saharan Africa.